Hi, for today's lesson, we are going to learn about the molecular shape. In this subtopic, we will discuss about the valence shell electron pair repulsion theory to determine the molecular shape of molecules and ions. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to explain the valence shell electron pair repulsion theory, or VSEPR, and draw the basic molecular shapes as linear, trigonal planar, tetrahedral, trigonal bipyramidal, and octahedral. Students also need to predict and explain the shape of molecule and bond angle in a given species. What is the meaning of the molecular geometry? Molecular geometry is the three-dimensional arrangement of the atoms that constitute a molecule. It includes the general shape of the molecule as well as bond length and the bond angle that determine the position of each atom. How to determine the molecular geometry? To determine the shapes of molecule, we must understand the Lewis structure of a molecule. Although the Lewis structure does not determine the shapes of molecules, it is the first step in predicting the shapes of the molecules. The Lewis structure helps us identify the bond pairs and the lone pairs. Understanding the molecular shape of a compound can help to determine the polarity, reactivity, the phase of matter, color, magnetism, as well as the biological activity. To identify and have a complete description of the three-dimensional shape of a molecule, we also need to state the bond angle as well. The valence shell electron pair repulsion theory states that the electron pairs in the valence shell of the atoms will repel one another and arrange themselves as far apart as possible to minimize the repulsion. Why do we need the VSEPR theory? The shapes of the molecules and ions can be predicted by the VSEPR theory. Using the theories, the electron bond pairs and the lone pairs on the central atom will help us to predict the shape of a molecule. There are three rules when applying the VSEPR theory. Rule number 1. The electron pairs around the central atom repel each other. The bonding pair and lone pair of electrons are oriented to be as far apart as possible to minimize the repulsion. Rule number 2. The order of the repulsion strength as shown in the diagram. The strongest repulsion is between lone pair repulsion, followed by the lone pair bonding pair repulsion and bonding pair repulsion. This diagram shows the decreasing strength of the repulsion. In the VSEPR theory, a lone pair of electrons repels more strongly than a bonding pair. This is because the region in space occupied by a lone pair electrons are closer to the nucleus compared to the bonding electrons. Thus, they exert a stronger repulsion on one another. Rule number 3. When we have a double bond or a triple bond, it is counted as only one bond pair. It occupies the position of a single covalent bond, for example, of carbon dioxide molecule. In carbon dioxide molecule, we have two double bonds around the carbon atom, so it is only counted as two bond pairs. Determination of the molecular shape of a molecule depends on the distribution of electron pairs on the central atom. The center atom can be divided into two categories. The first is the center atom without lone pairs. The electron pair repulsion is only involved between the bonding pairs electron. The second category is the center atom with lone pairs. In this molecule, the electron pair repulsion involved between lone pair and bonding pair electrons. The distribution of electron pairs on the center atom of a molecule will determine the electron pairs arrangement. This electron pair arrangement will determine only by the number of electron pairs, and it will give the 5 basic molecular shape. Besides that, the distribution of electron pairs will determine the molecular geometry. It will depend on the number of bond pairs and the lone pairs. Applying the VSEPR theory, it will determine the molecular shape. The molecular shape of a molecule without lone pairs on the central atom will give 5 basic molecular shapes. There are linear shape, trigonal planar, tetrahedral, trigonal bipyramidal, and octahedral. For a linear shaped molecule, the central atom was bonded to 2 terminal atoms. Let's say A represent the central atom and B represent the terminal atoms. The general formula can be written as AB2, with the total number of electron pairs around the central atom is 2 pairs. The arrangement of electron pairs will form a linear shape. Without the presence of lone pairs, the molecular geometry obtains a linear shape. The bond angle between the bond pairs is 180 degrees. For a trigonal planar, the central atom bonded to 3 terminal atoms. The general formula is AB3, whereas the number of electron pairs is equal to 3. The 3 bond pairs are arranged in trigonal planar. Without the presence of any lone pairs, it obtained the molecular geometry of trigonal planar, with bond angles 120 degrees. For a tetrahedral, the central atom bonded to 4 terminal atoms. The general formula is AB4, whereas we have a total number of 4 electron pairs. All the bond pairs are arranged in tetrahedrals. Without the presence of any lone pairs, it will form a molecular geometry of tetrahedral, with bond angles between the bond pairs is 109.5 degrees. For a trigonal bipyramidal, the central atom bonded to 5 terminal atoms. The general formula for the molecule is AB5, whereas we have 5 total number of electron pairs. The 5 bond pairs are arranged in trigonal bipyramidal. Without the presence of any lone pairs, the molecular geometry will obtain trigonal bipyramidal. Each of the bond angle between the bond pairs are 90 degrees and 120 degrees. For an octahedral, the central atom was bonded to 6 terminal atoms. With a general formula AB6, we have 6 electron pairs. The 6 electron pairs are arranged in octahedral. Without the presence of any lone pairs, it will obtain a molecular geometry of octahedral with bond angle of 90 degrees. Here are steps to determine the molecular geometries. The first step is to draw the Lewis structure. In this step, we will identify the bond pairs and the lone pairs. The second step is applying the VSEPR theories. In this step, we will apply the concept whereas electron pairs will spread themselves as far apart as possible from each other to minimize the repulsions. The third step is determine the molecular geometry. In this step, the shape and the bond angle of a molecule is determined by the position of the bond pairs and the lone pairs on the central atom. Now, let us consider a few examples. Determine the molecular geometry of beryllium chloride. First step is draw the Lewis structure for the molecule. From the Lewis structure of beryllium chloride, it shows that beryllium atom was surrounded by 2 electron pairs, whereas both are bonding pairs. Therefore, the bonding pairs are arranged in a linear shape. The second step is apply the VSEPR theories. Since in the molecules we have only bonding pairs, therefore each of the bonding pairs are repel each other equally. Finally, we can determine the molecular geometry of the molecule. The molecular geometry will obtain a linear shape with bond angle 180 degrees. The next example is boron trifluoride. First step, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. In the Lewis structure, we can identify the 3 electron pairs that surrounded the boron atom, whereas all the 3 electron pairs are bonding pairs. All the 3 bonding pairs are arranged in trigonal planar. The second step is apply the VSEPR theories. Since we have only a bonding pairs in the molecules, thus the 3 bonding pairs will repel each other equally to 120 degrees. And finally, we can determine the molecular geometry of a molecule, whereas it will obtain a trigonal planar, with bond angle is 120 degrees for each of the bond. The third example is methane. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can identify the carbon atom was surrounded by 4 electron pairs, whereas all the 4 electron pairs are bonding pairs. All the 4 bonding pairs are arranged in tetrahedral. The second step is apply the VSEPR theories. Since in the molecules, we have only 4 bonding pairs, therefore all the bonding pairs are repel each other equally to 109.5 degrees. And finally, we can determine the molecular geometry, whereas methane is a tetrahedral with a bond angle 109.5 degrees. Next is phosphorus pentachloride. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can identify the phosphorus atom was surrounded by 5 electron pairs, whereas all the 5 electron pairs are bonding pairs. Therefore, the bonding pairs are arranged in trigonal bipyramidal. The next step is applying the VSEPR theories. Since in the molecule only consists of bonding pairs, therefore all the 5 bonding pairs are repel each other to 90 degrees and 120 degrees. And finally, it will obtain the molecular geometry of this molecule as a trigonal bipyramidal with bond angle 90 degrees and 120 degrees between the bond pairs. The last example is sulfur hexafluoride. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can identify that is the sulfur atom has 6 electron pairs, whereas all the 6 electron pairs are bonding pairs. The 6 bonding pairs are arranged in octahedral. The next step is apply the VSEPR theories. Since in this molecule only consists of bonding pairs, therefore all the 6 bonding pairs will repel each other equally to 90 degrees. And finally, we can determine the molecular geometry for this molecule as an octahedral. The bond angle is 90 degrees between each bond pairs. Now, let us determine the molecular shape of a molecule with lone pairs on the central atom. Determination the geometry of molecule is more complicated if the central atom has both lone pairs and bonding pairs. the different strength of repulsive force must be considered. There are three types of repulsive forces. First, the lone pair repulsion. Next, the lone pair bonding pair repulsion and the bonding pair repulsion. Considering the central atom of a molecule that was surrounded by three electron pairs, in which two of the electron pairs are the bonding pairs, while one of it is lone pairs, we produce a band shape or a V shape. The bond angle will reduce to less than 120 degrees. For a central atom of a molecule with 4 electron pairs, in which 3 of the electron pairs are bond pairs and 1 lone pairs, it will produce a molecular geometry of trigonal pyramidal. The bond angle will be less than 109.5 degrees. A central atom of a molecule with 4 electron pairs, in which 2 of the electron pairs are the bonding pairs and 2 lone pairs, it will produce a molecular geometry of a band shape. The bond angle will be less than 109.5 degrees. The band shape is also known as a V shape. For a central atom of a molecule with 5 electron pairs, whereas 4 of the electron pairs are bonding pairs and 1 lone pairs, it will produce a molecular geometry of a seesaw. The bond angle produced less than 90 degrees and less than 120 degrees. The seesaw is also known as a distorted tetrahedron. For a central atom of a molecule with 5 electron pairs that having 3 bonding pairs and 2 lone pairs, it will produce a molecular geometry of T-shape. The bond angle is less than 90 degrees. The central atom of a molecule with 5 electron pairs that having 2 bond pairs and 3 lone pairs, it will produce a molecular geometry of a linear shape. The bond angles between the bond pairs is 180 degrees. For a central atom of a molecule with 6 electron pairs, when having 5 bonding pairs and 1 lone pair, it will produce a molecular geometry of square pyramidal. The bond angle between the bond pairs is less than 90 degrees. For a central atom of a molecule with 6 electron pairs that having 4 bond pairs and 2 lone pairs, it will produce a molecular geometry of square planar. The bond angle between the bond pairs is 90 degrees. Now, let's try to determine the molecular geometry of this compound. The first compound is sulfur dioxide. First, draw the Lewis structure of the molecule. From the Lewis structure of this molecule, we can see that the sulfur atom was surrounded by 3 electron pairs, whereas 2 of the electron pairs are bonding pairs and 1 lone pair. Remember that the double bond is always counted as 1 bond pair. Therefore, all the bond pairs are arranged in trigonal planar. When applying the VSEPR theory, the lone pair bonding pair repulsion is stronger than the bond pair repulsion. Therefore, the bonding pair will repel closer and reduce the bond angle. And finally, we can determine the molecular geometry of a molecule. The molecular geometry for this sulfur dioxide is a band shape with bond angle less than 120 degrees. Now, let's determine the molecular geometry for ammonia. First, draw the Lewis structure for the molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can identify that the nitrogen atom was surrounded by 4 electron pairs, whereas 3 of the electron pairs is the bonding pairs and 1 lone pair. All the electron pairs are arranged in tetrahedral. When applying the VSEPR theories, the lone pair bonding pair repulsion is stronger than bonding pair repulsion. Therefore, the bonding pairs will repel closer and reduce the bond angle. And finally, we can determine the molecular geometry of ammonia. The molecular geometry obtains a trigonal pyramidal. Bond angle with less than 109.5 degree. Next, let's consider for water molecule. First, draw the Lewis structure of water molecule. From the Lewis structure of water molecules, we can identify that is, the oxygen atom was surrounded by 4 electron pairs. 2 of the electron pairs was the bonding pairs and 2 lone pairs. All the electron pairs are arranged in tetrahedral. When applying the VSEPR theories, the lone pair repulsion is stronger than lone pair bonding pair repulsion and bonding pair repulsion. Thus, it will determine the molecular geometry of this molecule as a band shape or the V shape. The bond angle will produce less than 109.5 degree. Now, let's consider for sulfur tetrafluoride. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can identify that is the sulfur atom was surrounded by 5 electron pairs, in which 4 of the electron pairs are bonding pairs and 1 lone pair. All the electron pairs are arranged in trigonal bipyramidal. Next, apply the VSEPR theory. According to the theory, the lone pair bonding pair repulsion is stronger than bonding pair repulsion. Therefore, it will determine the molecular geometry of a molecule which is a seesaw or the distorted tetrahedron. The bond angle produced less than 90 degree and less than 120 degree. Next, let's consider chlorotrifluoride. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure of a molecule, we can identify that the chlorine atom was surrounded by 5 electron pairs, in which 3 of the electron pairs are bonding pairs and 2 lone pairs. All the electron pairs are arranged in trigonal bipyramidal. Next, apply the VSEPR theory. According to the theory, the lone pair repulsion is stronger than lone pair bonding pair repulsion and bonding pair repulsion. Therefore, it will determine the molecular geometry of a molecule. So chlorotrifluoride is a T shape with a bond angle less than 90 degree. Now, let's try for ICl21- ion. First, draw the Lewis structure for the molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can identify that is the iodine atom was surrounded by 5 electron pairs. 2 of the electron pairs are bonding pairs and 3 lone pairs. All the electron pairs are arranged in trigonal bipyramidal. Next, apply the VSEPR theory. According to the theory, the lone pair repulsion is stronger than lone pair bonding pair repulsion and bonding pair repulsion. And now, we can determine the molecular geometry. The molecular geometry for this ion is linear shape. The bond angle is 180 degree. The next example is bromopentafluoride. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure of a molecule, we can identify that the bromine atom was surrounded by 6 electron pairs, in which 5 of the electron pairs are bonding pairs and 1 lone pair. All the electron pairs are arranged in octahedral. Next, apply the VSEPR theory. According to the theory, the lone pair bonding pair repulsion is stronger than bonding pair repulsion. Then we can determine the molecular geometry. The molecular geometry for this molecule is a square pyramidal. The bond angle must be less than 90 degrees. Our last example is xenon tetrafluoride. First, draw the Lewis structure of a molecule. From the Lewis structure, we can see that the xenon atom was surrounded by 6 electron pairs, whereas 4 of the electron pairs is the bonding pairs and 2 lone pairs. All the electron pairs are arranged in octahedral. Then apply the VSEPR theory. According to the theories, the lone pair bonding pair repulsion is stronger than bonding pair repulsion. Therefore, it will determine the molecular geometry for the molecule. The molecular geometry for the molecule is a square planar with bond angle 90 degrees. Now, you can try these questions to enhance your understanding. Thank you.